Several people have asked me already this morning if I was going to talk about the Supreme Court ruling that came down on Friday about same-sex marriage. And I'm not going to spend, I don't think, it may get stuck in my mind and keep coming up over and over, but I don't think I'm going to spend much time on it. Because we've talked about these issues in detail already. And I was not surprised in the least that the Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution, written over 220 years ago, actually includes a provision that says that marriage must include people of the same gender. They recognize that it doesn't say that, but we are now a nation where what men decide should be is what will be, rather than what an entire people have agreed on will rule. It's just what the rulers agree on will rule. And that's where we live today. And I dislike that greatly, but I do not believe that it is my job as a preacher. I do not believe that it is our job as a congregation of the Lord's church to try to save the Supreme Court or to try to save the Constitution of the United States. I believe that it is my job as a preacher and our job as a congregation to try to draw closer to God. My job is to help people draw closer to God, and our job as a congregation is to help one another draw closer to God, and to help people who are not here draw closer to God. And if we have to do that in a degraded culture, if we have to do that in a place that legalizes immorality, then we will do it in that place and in that culture. And I think that's where we live today. But I want to follow up on our lesson from last week, which does play in, at least in some sense, to the ruling on homosexual marriage that came down on Friday. Last week, we started talking about masculinity. And we talked about Adam. We talked about the creation of Adam. And we talked about how Adam was created in the wild, and how men have an innate desire for adventure, how men are created for struggle and for difficulty, and how men are created for work, for building, and for doing, being people of action. I want to follow up on that and talk some more in the next few weeks about some other aspects of what a man is supposed to be. Because our culture, as evidenced on Friday and in so many different ways recently, has lost touch with what the masculine side of our species was created to be. And that's why I asked Brother Andrew to read this passage from Nehemiah, because this morning I want us to look at the example of Nehemiah. Last week we looked at Adam. We talked about the creation of man. Today I want us to talk about protection, because it is fundamental to what a man is and what a man was created to be, is to protect his domain, to protect his loved ones, his family, his country, his congregation, wherever his place and whatever his realm of responsibility is. One of the fundamental parts of masculinity is protection. And that's why some of the most moving stories, some of the most moving books, some of the most moving movies that stir our passions have this at the very center. The reason that we idolize, or idolize is not the right word, but the reason we hold up and esteem men who sacrifice themselves in war is because they're protecting our society, or they're protecting our culture, or they're protecting our way of life. You think about movies where men are called on, they don't have anything, they don't have special training, but they're thrust into this situation where they have to protect their families. And that speaks to all of us. And if you have a wife and children, it speaks to you very strongly, this idea of protecting. And that's what I want us to talk about for a little bit today. Go here with me to Nehemiah. We'll start in chapter 1. Let me set up the historical context in which Nehemiah lives. That clock is wrong. So I've got about 3.5 hours until I'm supposed to be done. I rely on that clock every week, and I go over most of the time, but now I'm really lost. Because at first I was about to panic because I've only got 15 minutes left. Nehemiah is an exile. He is a Jew, probably born into exile. You remember Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians finally overthrew Jerusalem and Judah and transported almost all of the people away from Judah to different points in the Babylonian Empire. Daniel was one of the exiles. Ezekiel was one of the exiles taken away into the Babylonian Empire. Daniel rises up to a very prominent position. He sees the fall of the Babylonian Empire, and the Medes and the Persians conquer the Babylonians and replace them with a humongous empire of their own just almost immediately. Just in a couple of generations, a couple of kings after Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians are gone. Well, Jews are living, and they live in exile for about 70 years, and there's a repopulation from exile to Jerusalem that lasts for several years, 10 or 15 years. So 70 years is about the time, but it's a moving figure because not everybody came back at the same time. Nehemiah is a cupbearer in the Persian kingdom. And so you've got the exile, you've got the Babylonians replaced by the Medes and Persians, which eventually just becomes the Persians in a very short period of time. And that's where Nehemiah is. Apparently not a very old man at this time. And he is going to lead people back to Jerusalem to repopulate the land of his fathers. So that's where we are in history. And this is really the very end of the Old Testament. You have Ezra and Nehemiah, and you have a couple of the minor prophets written at this time. And that's where the even if you look at the way your Old Testament is organized, it doesn't come at the end. But chronologically in history, Nehemiah is at the very end of the Old Testament. So Nehemiah's job is to make sure nobody poisons the king of Persia. And so what all that entails is difficult to know exactly, but it certainly entails that if somebody gets poisoned by the wine of the king, Nehemiah is going to be killed. His life is on the line if something adulterated gets into what the king drinks. And so he's the person who's going to drink it first and make sure there's nothing bad in it. He's probably going to take it upon himself to gather it and to keep it and to guard it and protect it all the time. But he's in close proximity with the king, but a not very lofty position. It's like your life is so unimportant that we'll let you die, and if you don't die, then we'll let the king drink the wine. That's he's very expendable, so to speak. But he's got access to the king. Nehemiah knows that he's a Jew, he knows that he's a slave, he knows that he's an exile. In chapter 1, verse 2, we have a man named Hanani who has been to Jerusalem, and he comes back to Persia where Nehemiah is. He says, Hanani, one of my brothers and some men from Judah came, and I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped and had survived their captivity about Jerusalem. They said to me, the remnant there in the province who survived the captivity are in great distress and reproach, and the wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. So, Nehemiah hears about the pitiful state of his homeland. He's never been there, almost certainly. Almost certainly never lived there. Almost certainly never visited there. And somebody has finally gotten to go and come back. And he says, how are the people who are left? What's it look like? And they said, it's a wreck. it's a wreck, and the people are being beaten down. They get treated awful. There are no walls. Everything is burned. It's just rubble. Nehemiah gets depressed. He's sad. First thing he does, he prays to God. He says, God, help me do something about this. Verse 8, in the middle of his prayer, Nehemiah is praying to God. He says, remember the word which you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though those of you who have been scattered were the remote part of the heavens, I will gather them from there and will bring them to the place where I have chosen to cause my name to dwell. Nehemiah, in a sense, is trying to put pressure on God. Nehemiah says, God, you prophesied. You promised that if we were unfaithful, you would send us away from our homeland. And you would scatter us all over the place. But God, you also promised that after you did that, you would bring us back. God, bring us back. We've been scattered. But you said you'd bring us back if we were faithful. And we won't go back. So, chapter 2, Nehemiah is in the presence of the king and queen. And they see that he's depressed. They see that he looks sad and forlorn. And they ask him about it. And in verse 5 of chapter 2, Nehemiah, I said to the king, if it please the king, if your servant has found favor before you, send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it. And so the king does. The king makes his wine bearer, his wine taster, his cupbearer, the governor of Judah, and gives him authority and writes him orders or letters showing that he has the authority to rule the area, and sends him back to Judah. He gets there in chapter 2, and in verse 17, he goes out and he inspects the city at night. And he sees how horrible everything is. And the walls are just completely falling down, and everything is a complete mess. Verse 17, he speaks to his fellow countrymen, his fellow Jews. And I said to them, you see the bad situation that we are in, that Jerusalem is desolate and its gates burned by fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, so that we will no longer be a reproach. Now, that's the introduction. That's what Nehemiah undertakes to do. He has the courage to say to the king, I want to go back and rebuild Jerusalem. The king says, okay, go. And he goes and he says, this is a huge wall. It's miles and miles long. Let's rebuild it. And that's when his trouble really starts. That's when he starts having real difficulty. Come forward to chapter 4. Chapter 3 records all the people who helped Nehemiah. And it records what parts of the wall the people worked on. But chapter 4 is what I asked Brother Andrew to read earlier, the first 3 verses. What you have here is you have 2 leaders of the people who are not Jews. You have Sanballat, the Horonite, and Tobijah, the Ammonite. They are people who are opposed to the rebuilding of the walls. And look at what they say here in the beginning part of chapter 4. Look at the middle of verse 2. What are these feeble Jews doing? Are they going to restore it for themselves? Can they offer sacrifices? Can they finish in a day? Can they revive the stones from the dusty rubble, even the burned ones? Now Tobiah the Ammonite was near him, and he said, even when they are building, if a fox should jump on it, he would break their stone wall down. You ever been worried about people making fun of you? You ever been worried that if you undertake an extremely difficult task, that you will fail? Have you ever thought about, I want to do something big. I want to do something different. I want to do something tough. But then you think about all the stuff that goes wrong. And it's one of the things you think about what people will say. Why are you doing that? You can't do that. That's not going. You're so pie in the sky. What a Pollyanna. How do you think anything will just knock that over? That's never going to hold up. That'll never work. And just thinking about people saying, just hearing it in your own imagination and saying, you know what, I can't do. You know what, I can't do. Let me tell you something. It takes courage to start building that wall. Amen. It takes courage to get past what these people are going to say. And they start doing it. They start building the wall. You come down here in chapter 4 to verse 10, and they start making real threats. They say, thus in Judah it was said, the strength of the burden bearers is failing, yet there is much rubbish, and we ourselves are unable to rebuild the wall. The people themselves are saying, there's all kinds of trash and rubble everywhere. We're getting tired. We're worn out. We can't do this. Verse 11, our enemies said, they will not know or see until we come among them, kill them, and put a stop to the work. When the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times, they will come up against us from every place where you may turn. So now the enemies are threatening. They're saying, we're going to attack. When they're working, we'll just jump in there and kill a bunch of them, and that'll take care of it. And Nehemiah's got this ramshackle group of men. They've never worked together as a group. They're not an army. They're not a labor force. They're just random villagers who've been living oppressed lives. And he's saying, no, y'all got to build the wall. And they're saying, we can't build the wall, and they're going to kill us if we do. Nehemiah equips them. And he says, all right, we're going to put guards on there. And half the people are going to stand guard, and they're going to have weapons, and I'm going to give them weapons, and they're going to guard the weapons, and the other half are going to work. And even the people who work are going to carry weapons. And so you'll hold your sword in one hand and build the wall with the other. And even when you go get some water, you're going to carry your weapon. And we'll put guards right behind the lowest parts of the wall all the time. And I'll have a bugler, or I'll have a trumpeter with me, and if there's trouble, we'll blow the trumpet, and y'all all come to where the trumpet is. And that's what he did. And they did it. Let me tell you, we need walls. Some of our walls need to be broken down. We often talk about the walls that need to be broken down. The walls of fear, and the walls of guilt, and the walls of shame, and the walls of sin. But we need some walls too. We need some walls around our hearts to protect us from this society we're living in. We need some walls around our marriages to help husbands and wives stay together and to remain one flesh and to resist the temptations of selfishness and immorality. We need walls around our children. We need walls around our children's hearts and around our children's minds to keep them away from the influences of our degraded society. We need walls around our children to keep them away from laziness and to teach them to work. But none of these walls will be built easily. And anytime you start thinking, I got to make some changes here, I got to improve this area of my life, you're going to have thoughts. And you're going to say, it's going to be really hard. And I've already made a pretty big mess. And I should have been doing this a long time ago. And this is mostly my own fault. And I'm not sure if I can fix it. And people are going to complain. And people are going to moan. And people are going to threaten. And people are not going to participate. And they're going to be pessimistic. And you're going to need courage. You're going to need courage. Because it's your responsibility to protect what God has entrusted with you. And it's a man's role. It's also a woman's role to protect. It's a woman's role to protect her children and her family. But she needs a man for the forces outside. Because that's what a man is built for. And that's what Nehemiah is doing. And you need help. Chapter 3 stands for the truth that we need help. We need each other. We have to do these things together to protect this congregation, to protect the family that meets here at Mountain Creek. We need each other to help build the walls and maintain the walls. You have to have help. But you also have to face your enemies. So Nehemiah stations the guards, gives people swords. They stay on lookout all the time, and they keep working. Chapter 5, they have problems from within, where the wealthy among the Jews are taking advantage of the poor, probably some who have come back from exile and don't have anything, don't have any land, don't have any wealth, and they are forcing the poor to sell their children and even themselves into slavery just for food. Selfish. They have to deal with that. But in chapter 6, they have to deal with some enemies from the outside. The same enemies as before. Go with me to chapter 6, verse 2. It's Sanballat, the same one, Sanballat the Horonite, and Geshem sent a message to me saying, "Come, let us meet together at Sephirim in the plain of Ono." But they were planning to harm me. So I sent messengers to them saying, "I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave and come down to you?" They sent messages to me 4 times in this manner. And I answered them in the same way. Your enemies will try to distract you. They will try to pull you away from the work that you're supposed to be doing. You have to say no. You have to say no. No, I'm not going to waste my time with you. You just want to hurt me. You just want to stop me. And I am not going to be distracted from what is actually important. The enemies don't stop there. Come down to verse 6 of chapter 6. They send Nehemiah a letter. In it was written, "It is reported among the nations, and Gashmu says that you and the Jews are planning to rebel. Therefore you are rebuilding the wall. You are to be their king, according to these reports. You have appointed prophets to proclaim in Jerusalem concerning you, a king is in Judah. Now it will be reported to the king according to these reports. So come now, let us take counsel together." Verse 9. For all of them were trying to frighten us, thinking they will become discouraged with the work and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. And he refuses. Oh, verse 8, let's get verse 8. I sent a message to him saying, "Such things as you are saying have not been done, but you are inventing them in your mind." So they start saying, "We're going to apply a little political interest. We're going to stab you in the back. We're going to send a message to the powers that be. We're going to send a message to the king saying, you're raising a rebellion. We're going to take your power away. You better come talk to us." Nehemiah says, "I'm not going to listen. You're independent in your mind. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do." And that's what he did. Very interesting. They got one more act that they pursued. Here in chapter 6, verse 10. When I entered the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, the son of Mehetabel, who was confined at home, he said, "Let us meet together in the house of God, within the temple. Let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. They are coming to kill you at night." Nehemiah says, "Buddy, they're going to assassinate you." But I said, "Should a man like me flee? Could one such as I go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in." This may tell us something really interesting about this man of God. Not sure, but there is a suspicion about Nehemiah. Why is it wrong for Nehemiah to go into the temple? This man says, "They're coming to kill you. let's go and take refuge in the temple. Nehemiah says, can a man like me go into the temple? We've seen other men of God flee. We saw David hide for years from Saul. We saw Elijah flee to the wilderness and hide in a cave, along with 100 other prophets that had been hidden in a cave. It's not wrong to protect himself. It's not wrong to take refuge. The speculation is that Nehemiah, in fact, this man of courage, this man of protection, may have been a eunuch. He may have been castrated by the Persians to be allowed to serve in the presence of the king. If you go back to chapter 2, verse 5, you'll see that the king and queen were both there. And it may be that he wouldn't even be allowed in the presence of the queen unless he were a eunuch. Deuteronomy 23, verse 1 says, no one who is emasculated or has his male organ cut off shall enter the assembly of the Lord. That may be the explanation why Nehemiah says, you're trying to trick me into sinning because you know that I am not supposed to go into the temple because I have been defiled, because I have been damaged by God's enemies. And a man damaged like me is not allowed in the temple. You see how his enemies are working on his mind? You see how they're trying every way they can, subtle political and psychological tactics to tear him down? It's the same thing they're going to do to you. It's the same thing they've been doing to you. It's the same thing they're going to do to your wife, and your children, and your parents, and your co-workers, and your brothers and sisters in Christ. They're going to attack you. But you've got to stand strong. You've got to stand strong and to protect what God has given you to protect. And you know what? It works. But if you're ready, they never even attack you. Look at verse 15 of chapter 6. So the wall was completed on the 25th of the month Elul in 52 days. All those threats never materialized. Removing Nehemiah from his governorship never happened. Because he stayed where he was supposed to be and did what he was supposed to do. And that's a picture of a man of God. That's a picture of strength and courage and protection. And even though he's not taming a wilderness, he's living an adventure. And he is fighting a battle, even though he never had to use those weapons. And he is building, and he rebuilt the wall that protected God's people, which is what men are created to do. It's a beautiful picture of a man of strength. Maybe even a man of strength who doesn't enjoy the full benefits of the masculinity that God has blessed him with. Part of it has maybe been taken away. But he did what God called him to do. And so can you. I want to remind you of what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10, verse 28. He says, do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul. But rather, fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not two sparrows sold for a cent? And yet not one of them will fall from the air apart from your Father. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So do not fear. You are of more value than many sparrows. God cares about you. God will protect you. Zechariah talks about God himself being a wall of fire around us, around his people. We have to stoke that fire. We have to keep that fire burning. But God will protect us, and God will see us through if we stay where we're supposed to be and do what we're called to do. I know that you'll do it. If you do not enjoy the forgiveness that Jesus makes available, if you do not enjoy the grace and the mercy of God that was brought in by the blood of Christ, it's available to you right now. If you've never come to Christ for the first time, do it today. Put your faith in Jesus, confess your faith, repent of your sins, be immersed in water for the forgiveness of sins. If you need to come to Christ, if you need to return to Christ, please come down front as we stand.